So, I hope that everybody's fed and watered and that you're comfortable. My name's Deborah West and I'm an Associate Director with People Opportunities Limited, and I would just like to extend a really warm welcome to everybody who's in the room. I've already had some fantastic conversations with people and it is wonderful to see you. Hope it's going to be a really good, fruitful evening, a really good, supportive evening. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to now hand over to Eden.
Thanks. Listen, thank you everybody for being here. We thought it'd be a great idea to get some really great people together just to have conversations. People who think that we need to go beyond, think differently, engage differently. Let's come together and have different conversations. As Anne-Marie reminded me, the conversation is the change. We spend a lot of time talking about what we're going to do. We don't often spend a lot of time just exploring, just being as human beings, and just connecting in different ways. Those different connections can produce different outcomes. So about 3 people have said to me, Eden, what do you want of us this evening? And I've said, just be yourself, just engage, have fun. We've got wine, we've got out beer, we've got soft drinks, we've got food. We've got more food coming later on if you can take it. But what's really important, we think, is to create an atmosphere in which we can just connect with each other and have different kinds of conversations. That's the purpose of this evening. I'm going to talk for a little while, not more than 20 minutes, I promise you, and then you are going to be doing the talking. This is not going to be an evening of talks from the front. Actually, the people who are going to do have most of the airspace are going to be you. Today, the context why are we here? Because a lot of people are suffering unnecessarily because of the way that we are, the way that we work, and it doesn't have to be like that. That we as a species, we as people in this room, have the ability to change things. What would generate that change is the extent to which we find other ways of being. I'll talk about evolution later on because I think there is something about, sometimes we think that the way we are is the way we will always be. But the way we are now is not the way we were before. Humanity has evolved hugely to be where we are now, and we can continue to evolve, and we can continue to build better ways of being together. And that's the bigger speech, the bigger talk around diversity and inclusion. It's not just about numbers, it's about how do we create a world in which human beings can be, can live, can connect in a way that is sustainable and in a way which exalts the human spirit. So we want to go beyond the boundaries of our organizations. We want to think about how we can speak and be in ways that help us create a brighter future, basically. So that's why we're here. Another reason why we're here is that existing approaches do not go far enough. The practical and conceptual tools that we have are not adequate to the situation. Just plugging along, doing the same things we've always done, are not going to produce other outcomes. We need to find other ways of doing it. And the mindset that existed, that makes us have sensible, logical, rational approaches to organizational change have proved inadequate in the past on their own. They're very useful. We need people who are sensible and rational and logical sometimes, but we need more than that if we're going to address the magic that is needed to take us forward. We need to go beyond that. So we're thinking about creating and having a space this evening for us to think differently, to connect differently, to have different conversations, to try and do things like put aside ego and I have the one right answer, and to say how can we converse in ways that help us to extend our thinking? How can we use that to extend not just how we think, but how we act as we go forward? I know so many people who sit down in meetings and they talk about equal opportunities beautifully. And then they walk out of those meetings and you meet them in a pub later on, a couple of drinks, and they say very different things after a while than what they do. And it's not that they're evil people or that they're hypocrites. It's that they're human. What's difficult is that those thoughts that they have, those transgressional thoughts that they have, are not part of the thinking that we do when we devise strategies and tactics. We leave outside whole bunches of stuff that is human, that is powerful, and that actually is what drives us. We've got Valerie here, we've got other people here today who talk about the unconscious processes in organizations, who talk about the unconscious in society, who talk about the factors that drive us, that often we miss out. Factors like greed, lust, pain, fear, envy, lust for power. All those things are part of the dynamic of our organizations, and too often we don't include them in our conversations. But if we don't do that, then what we produce is not going to be adequate to the task. So we think it's important that we step into the zone of uncomfortable debate. We think it's important that we have different kind of conversations. And I want us to talk, I want us not to pussyfoot around, not to worry about stepping on eggshells, but to have the conversations. We know from the work of people like Patricia Shaw that if you really want change to take place, then you have to change the conversations that people have. Change what they talk about, how they talk about it, where they talk about it, who they talk about it with, and the content of that they have to speak with. I think that often in our organizations, we have something that I sometimes call polite parallelism. That is that we exist in our organizations alongside each other. We talk to each other. We do the same job sometimes, but actually we live in different worlds. And there are people who are different to us, and we never know what's really going on for them. And because we never really know what's going on for them, the kind of decisions and approaches that we have are purely intellectual, purely come from our heads. And there's something about what is possible by connecting beyond that. But in order to do that, we have to go past the barriers of protection that we've built up for ourselves. Because these barriers of protection are in fact barriers of perception. They affect what we can see. And if we can't see stuff, it's very hard to do something with it. So for me, when we think about having new conversations, I think what they open up is the possibility of different kind of relationships. The amount of organizations that have been asked to come and work with their senior leadership teams to help them work on strategy or to help them evolve something. And actually what's really going on is that the chair can't stand the chief executive, or the finance director is seen as being really difficult but nobody wants to upset her, or the real dimensions taking place. And the difficult task of working on human relationships, some people are so afraid of it that they will spend a fortune on people like myself to come in and give them pretty answers rather than tackling the stuff that's really going on there. And for me, the possibility of really having different conversations is that we can start to evolve in our organizations, but also more widely, new relationships, new ways of being together. I sometimes feel like a crook when I work with some of the boards I work with, because sometimes all I do is get them to talk to each other, to really talk, to really connect with each other. And I achieve far more when I'm doing that than what I used to do when I used to use all these instruments and things to help them be able to look at themselves through these weird lenses. But actually having the direct face-to-face conversations about what really matters creates much better relationships, which drags to more understanding, and through that understanding, new insights, and beautifully new possibilities emerge. I don't know what the future is. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what it is that we're trying to achieve in precise terms. And that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that we spent a lot of time and energy talking about what we don't want, what we want to avoid, what we mustn't say. I mean, I've had someone come on the course, and after half an hour, he said, Eden, let's not do all that stuff, all that awareness raising stuff, because I've done all that before. All I need to know are what are the right words that I need to use from now on, because they keep changing. If I could just write them down, I'd leave early actually, because I don't need to stay for all that stuff. And I think there's that, I see some recognition taking place there. It's just pointless. It's absolutely pointless. So there's something about how do we work with everybody. So this evening, I think when we're having our conversations, there's something about exploring what's possible, connecting with just what we can achieve rather than just what we mustn't do, what we must stop doing. And then, of course, there's notion of strategies and there's action. I know so many people who are really good at devising strategies and they never do anything about them. So hopefully from this evening, the kinds of things that you come up with will be things that will help you think about what you can do afterwards. Even though sometimes some of those things that you can do is being different. So we've got Tracy Jolliffe here, and one of the things that Tracy has done in the Leadership Academy is just to model a different way of being, and it's had huge influence on the culture of the Leadership Academy. And I think sometimes we focus too much on doing, and the power of being different, living according to your values, doing the things that you need to do is underestimated. I came across this article by this bloke called Rick Lash. I know, Rick Lash, it sounds weird. But the good thing about it is that he's British. You probably know him. Oh. But he talks about the fact that the way we behaved in the past is not the way we have to behave in the future. That actually, that the human mind, human brain, that the physiology of the brain has changed and grown as a direct result of people learning how to work together. It's absolutely fascinating, because what that suggests to me is that in the task of learning how we can be together in different ways, what we are doing is driving forward the evolution of our species. When we stick with what's comfortable, then we prevent us developing, not just in terms of our ideas, not just in terms of our financial resources, but in terms of just what we can be as human beings. So there's something about the possibility that I think working differently with human beings, connecting differently with human beings, really seeking inclusion and human value in rather than just box-ticking numbers things, there is a potential that we don't take enough notice of. So I love this notion of going beyond the open door. If you're going to change something, you can't do it just from the safety of the paradigms and concepts and ways of working and ways of being that you've always done. There's something about stepping outside and trying things differently. I remember I did some work for what was then called, where's Roger? You know this stuff. Roger? Ah, there he is. You remember this because you're young like me. The Bethlehem and Maudsley Mental Health Trust. Do you remember that? No, you don't. Okay, cool. Well, I did some work with them about 20 years ago, and they were concerned about the fact that there was a lot of black males who'd been brought in and for schizophrenia. And they said the solution is that we have to train more black male psychiatrists. And so their strategy was to go to universities and to try and recruit more black male psychiatrists. When they went there, they found that there weren't black men in the universities studying psychiatry. In fact, there were not a lot of black men there at all. And they'd done the obvious. They'd advertised for jobs, they'd advertised in the papers, they'd gone to this place. And what they realized is if they stayed there, nothing different would happen. So what did some of the psychiatrists decided to do was to go, because they were from King's, where King's is now. What they did is they went to local youth clubs in Camberwell, which has got a very high African population, and they worked with the young people there. And the intention was to have a long-term strategy that would get those young people to apply for jobs in psychiatry in the future. But actually, what really caused the difference was just spending time with those young people, engaging with them. Something changed, and the rate at which people were what you call it, sections, declined. Then a new chief executive came in, and he was too sensible to allow that sort of things to happen, so we evolved into something else. I guess part of what I'm saying is that if we really want to move forward, then we should be driven more by our values and the things we really believe in than by policy or by somebody saying, this is your job, this is what you should do. I'm going to pick on Roger again. When I first met Roger, about 4 years, Roger, how we connected is because Roger has got a passion for justice and for social justice, and he's a ex-trade union man, probably still trade union man, but he had a really powerful sense of how whatever we do has got to, I can't find the right words, liberate, focus on the people who are typically not connected, not valued, not treated, and that there needs to be actions that can do something for those people, that kind of transformational stuff. It's not just about what your organization says, it's about what your policies and values tell you to do. I wanted to skip this slide, but it's come up here now, so I'll show you. I got it from Deloitte's. And I just look at those points at the side. The 6 signature traits of an inclusive leader. A couple of things I like is cognizance, self-awareness. You can't see it down there, but it's this idea that if you're going to be an inclusive leader, you need to be self-aware. You need to understand yourself. You need to be aware of your own biases and the ways that you think. You need to be curious. You need to have cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence is a very interesting concept. It's as much about being aware of your own culture and the impact it has. It's about being aware of the culture of others. You need to learn how to work with others. It needs commitment, it needs courage, because this is a long-term journey. I'm going to skip the next slide, which I quite liked, but we haven't got time for it. It's literally about what we need to move from and what we need to move towards, which is much more positive ways of doing things, much more positive ways of being. I'm going to disagree with myself straight away, I think, and I will talk about it very briefly. I don't know. I a lot of people, they keep talking about the struggle or the cause or the task, and I'm thinking, when you associate something with that language, what does that do for you? You know, yeah, thank you. It makes you weary, Mavis. It makes you tired. But when you think about it, I'm engaged in possibility. I'm engaged in building something that could really make a difference. That's a different energy. When you tell people what they have to do, you must stop doing that, you must do it, this is what the law says, that works to a certain extent. But if you're not also helping people to aspire and to connect to their dreams and their humanity, then it's not going to work. It can't just be top down. The amount of people who say, yes, 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 I've been on this course and now I'm going to go and talk to my chief executive so that we can have change. Well, we know that change doesn't happen like that at all. And it's about people from all different levels of the organisation taking action. Right, I'm going to skip the rest because I'm determined to stick to the timetable. I'm determined to say that we aren't starting from a blank sheet. That every single person in this room has made significant contributions in this area at some point in time, and most of you still are. That you are the resource that we have. By we, I mean, sometimes I think the whole NHS or the whole of our society, you are the people who are doing that different thing, you're prepared to engage in that. And there's something about having conversations that enable you to support each other, enrich each other's thinking, help you evolve your thinking, that we think is really valuable. I'm really, really pleased that you're all here. And I'd like to ask you to get involved now in the conversations that we're going to be having. Have I explained the structure to you? Haven't, have I? Okay, this is the structure. Is that my job, Ruby? Okay, thank you. Okay, so the structure is going to be simple. That in your groups of 5, you're going to open an envelope and have a conversation that comes from that for 15 minutes. Then we're going to stop. And then from your group, we can have 10 contributions from people. None of those contributions will be more than 1 minute long. And it's just anything you want to say. Then we mix up, you can change groups, and just open the second envelope, and there's another question there that you can use to explore, and we repeat the same thing. If time works out okay, we've got a third question. And then we've got, in theory, at 8:10, we move to general opening up and more networking, and I'd love that food to get eaten, and we paid for the beer and the wine. It'd be quite nice if at least most of it gets drunk. It'd be quite nice to just have some relaxed conversation together. At 9 o'clock we finish. I'm not encouraging alcoholism or doing anything that's not good, but I'm thinking that there's something about the spirit with which you engage in change helps create the outcome that you want. And I think that we can make phenomenal things happen by working hard, being honest, and enjoying ourselves along the way. So I'd like you to enjoy yourself this evening, have a really good time, have some good conversations. So, Ruby.
I'm here to start the fun now and the fun conversations. I think what's resonated with me is it's not just about evolution and making organisations fantastic. I think there's something really healing for ourselves when we have these conversations, when we start to have them back with the people we rub shoulders with. So we were slightly inspired by the Oscars, hence the envelopes, but we do but we are very confident that the right slips are in the right ones. So please, can you find envelope number 1? They're different colours for each table, and just have a chat. You don't have to stick to the script, but we'll come back to you in 15 minutes.
So it is about being authentic, being true to yourself, sharing your experience and your truth, but also being prepared actually for, or being prepared for whatever it is that comes back, which you can't always guarantee what comes back from the other person.
And I was saying that a lot of the reason why certain conversations don't take place is because there's a fear. And that's the root of a lot of the reasons why. And people will only communicate honestly when they feel safe to do so. So, yeah.
And sorry, just to add to that, because we did have that conversation about feeling safe, but also when you have some kind of position authority, it allows you and enables you to speak truthfully.
Yeah, and I think the thing that do I need this? The thing that I certainly was learning was the most powerful stories are our own personal stories. It's the stuff that we've lived, and that's the bit that we're very reluctant to give out, and I think that's where we're moving towards, I think.
Okay. Hi everyone, good evening. My heart is full, actually. Thank you, Eden. Thank you for getting me here. We had a conversation that really, I think, am I right in saying took a while to get going? We were kind of like getting to know each other a little bit as best we could in the time afforded. But Nicholas got us thinking about some of the bad stuff that's in there, some of the human bad stuff that's in there, and whether or not there was an opportunity in these real and authentic conversations to actually get that real about it. That we talked about, the equation of human kindness often being only equal to human wickedness, and that we, through connections, that's Talib Kweli, it's not me, but I've remembered it. But that we as community, we have across perhaps traditional lines and borders, we have the ability to connect and to make sense of that, and that in making sense of that, I guess, offer our best. There was some further points made, and I'm looking to my newfound friends as to whether or not they want to come through with any of that. Louisa.
Beautiful point. Again, Nicholas, about how we can be kind in the face of difference. And I suppose one thing I was sitting with is also how we can be kind in the face of competition, and how we can be kind to ourselves in the face of our own meanness. And I was also just playing in the moment with the social norm that we've established to stand, and how hard it is for me to sit, because there's already a convention of standing, and how that's a bit of an illustration, isn't it, of how we get taken up in the norms and the trends and the rituals and the routines, and how holding our difference might be perceived as rebellious, but it also might be authentic. And I'm not quite sure sitting here what the balance is in me not standing. Does anybody else want to say? No. Beautiful job, by the way, new friend.
No, we also spoke about courage and how difficult it is when you're weathered on a daily basis to stand up courageously and speak your truth. That was one of the issues that we talked about.
Assumptions as well. We talked about assumptions, so how people sort of arrive at assumptions and are not curious and, dig a little deeper to understand what that is. We also talked about fear and the way that we work and how that's driven by targets and different things creates a fear of delivery, and then it's almost like we forget that there's a person or an individual associated with that.
And just on the basis of conversations that we want to start, I think it's about there's almost the lack of permissive culture to have a conversation about who an individual is. So we say, this is our objectives and what is it you want to achieve, but we don't say who are you and what are you all about and what makes you tick. And I think for my personal journey is having worked in a really toxic environment and the impact that has on you as an individual at a very senior level. So I'm not sure as an executive at that level, I'm not sure the positional power for me felt like I could have a courageous conversation personally in my experience experience. But my drive is to bring more love into the workplace. And I think the word love is something we don't use because it just feels a bit wrong. But I think it's a word that we really need to use. So that's my personal view.
And one of the conversations that we had was the fed up conversation, how sick and tired we are of sitting in rooms where people are just being polite and going through the motions. And, you know, it's time that we were courageous, actually, and said, what are we doing? You know, is this even meaningful? You know, if it isn't, can I go and get a sandwich? You know, something, because there is the, I think it links to your point, Louisa, about convention. And if we are going to shift patterns, if we are going to get different outcomes, if we're going to do things differently, you know, at some point we have to break the cycle that just reproduces more of the same. And it may be just saying this is a meaningless conversation. Unless we're prepared to go deeper, I'm off.
I'm just thinking how to summarise. I think what we identified as a group, I need your help with this, was that it starts with the personal. That breaking the bridges between people starts with talking about the personal, about who we are as people, what's affected us. But that involves risk. And there's always this tension between how much do I tell somebody, what are they going to do with that information, and how much do I need to be true to myself. That is, I think, a tension that can only be resolved through experience, and it means that we're going to get burned sometimes. But iron gets tougher through fire. So I think it's important for us to take that courage, take those risks, and sometimes you form connections with people that you never thought were even there. So I think that was kind of what we were sort of saying. Is there anything else?
Okay. We also talked about fear and fear of getting in the way of being honest and political correctness. We also said we needed to talk about conflict and how we have a very rosy view of diversity, and the fact that actually with diversity should come good conflict about how we reshape how we work together, how we live and be as organisations. So it's a sort of transformational opportunity within conflictual conversations. We talked about power. That might be a conversation that we don't have, that we might need to have. What else did we talk about?
We talked about inclusive too, and we said, well, what is actually inclusive? Inclusive of who and of what, and maybe questioning some of those conventions about inclusion, and came up with some examples about, what is inclusion, and that's got us onto many avenues of gender and bullying and, you name it. But it was really getting back to the core question of, life-enhancing inclusive cultures. So what do we mean by inclusion?
I think what's really powerful is the connection between the different conversations, and something about fear and vulnerability and us bringing that into the room as we're being a bit more human with each other. And as people who really care about this work, the fear that we hold around this, I think, is really interesting, because this is the kind of work that we're going to go back and lead. So maybe us kind of, the fire will make us tougher when we go back after today. Can I ask you to mix it up a little bit now and try and find somebody new?
I'm ready. Now that you're mixed, it makes me think it wasn't mixed before. But now that you're mixed, I kind of recall a memory. It seems like it's almost over 35 years ago. And Eden and I was at the top of a... I don't know about your conversation. I do. of of a house which I lived in, and we used to have these, even in those days, those kind of peer counselling sessions. So he remembers now. And one of the things that he said to me from those distant days was, he says that, Ian, what I wish for you is to be happy. And at that time, I didn't know the fullness of it. But as I speak today, that fullness is kind of blossoming in me and hopefully in the room, because when we talk about people opportunities, we actually talk about people being happy in work and in life. And we're saying it in that way, and it's not to say that work can't be tough, or the kind of issues that we need to focus on might not be a struggle. But there's something about when we take it on board lightly, we just bring a different kind of energy to it. And when we bring that lightness to it, I think we just offer ourselves new possibilities to create change more than we ever imagined. And some of the conversation that I have and love having is, how do we get to that place where we can have these other kinds of conversation? And I always underpin it with one simple focus. How do we bring our big selves into the room? Because all of us want to achieve and accomplish something much bigger than ourselves. And that's how we bring our humanity into the room. And in bringing our humanity into the room, we have a focus, and that focus is always not just who we are, which is really an important aspect to it, but also what is our purpose and what's our passion. And we feel that when we focus on purpose and passion, that's often we can create sustainable happiness. Even sometimes in a world that feels very unhappy, we have that ability and we have that quality. And we embrace that in a way that we say we do it, one conversation, one team, one organization, one country at a time. We can create the change that we want to see. And that's what's at the core of what we feel people opportunities are about. And central in that is that we really want to be part and parcel of organization that really houses a loving human spirit. That's what we're about, because we feel if people are operating in organizations in that way, it just offers us the possibility and possibilities to achieve so much. So much. But how is it and how can we turn up into organization in that way? How can we create organization that is so inclusive that really nobody gets left behind? Because inclusion actually includes every single person in the organization, every voice in the organization having a platform to communicate what it is that they want from those organizations. And that's just the premise of the second question. You've had your go. Right. On your tables is an envelope number 2. It's all yours to open and continue a new conversation. Thank you.
equality, diversity and inclusion. But I think what really resonates with me is it's difficult to dream. It's easy to dream, but it's difficult to dream about something that you've never experienced.
So in our mind's eye, we can think, yeah, I'd like to be treated this way, but you've never actually experienced it. And, you know, for me, the platform and the way forward would be to have an inclusive platform where, I don't like the word inclusion because it means you're excluded anyway. So it's like you're in the gang now and you think, yeah, gee, thanks. Where was I before? I'd rather just stay there. But it's about looking at individuals, looking at where we are, where we all can be, and looking at what we all bring to the table and the platform, and how we as individuals move forward with that. I think that is more empowering rather than sort of like giving it a title and everybody subscribing to it, because not everybody actually buys into it. It's a template that we all have to more or less squeeze into in certain respect.
Yeah, we had some of that conversation here as well, and one of the things that happened is that we spoke about, just the point that Roger made, about the danger, what that happens when you speak the unsayable, when you say the difficult thing. But what happens when you don't is that things remain the same. And we started talking about how do you develop, almost like, what's that phrase? How do we teach people to be people? How do we help people to become more skillful and able to have those conversations? Because silence can't be a permanent option, really. But also clumsy conversations create more damage than not. So how do you help people to develop that ability? And then we got into a conversation about education and the ways in which education become more and more transactional, and it's less about humanity or society, it's much about individuals getting an X amount of GCSEs, A-levels, whatever. But the ability to be human and to be able to communicate and connect with other people is something that we don't spend a lot of time on anymore. As per time, we never did spend enough time on it, but it's something that we need to spend more time on. And perhaps some things that we can do in our work in organizations is to help people to develop the ability to have those conversations, because you can't have those conversations without having the language, without having some other stuff, the permission, the spaces, and I think that's part of what that we either unconsciously or consciously are doing. Many people in this room are actually working on doing it already. It's really important.
I'm cheating, I didn't say this here, but these are just church thoughts. And the thought is, it's going on from the thing about language. So, because, going up to your point, Roger, as a black woman working in organisations, it's too great a risk at times to say what I truly feel or what I truly experience. So, and it's not just me, there's a whole conglomeration of people, women, people with disabilities, LGBTQ people, you know, who are not saying what they truly feel and what they truly experience. And because those conversations are taboo, we don't get the exercise. I've got one of these wrist things here, which counts your steps. I didn't realise that you had to step in order for it to count. Right. So that's it. So we have to do the exercise to get the shape that we want. And if we are working within cultures that so suppress the expression of this is how I feel, and this how I feel is because of my identity and what that means within this environment. How I'm experiencing you is not as you're intending for me to experience you, but it's actually really oppressive. And what oppressive means to me is this, and this. And actually it's these behaviours and these attitudes and the things that you say that make me feel like this, you know, or cause me to feel like this. Because you don't exercise those kinds of conversations, we don't even know where to start. You know, we don't know where to start in articulating them, and we don't know where to start in terms of being able to hear them. To hear them with that kind of curiosity and critical reflection that's necessary, and the maturity, the psychological maturity to hear conversations without thinking, oh, it's all about me. The world is not all about them. You know, it's there's something that we haven't yet started to exercise in terms of some muscles that we have. And we somehow need to get into that space. And it's going to take a few brave people to start that conversation, I think.
I'm going to bring my bravery. Are you going to say something?
I was just going to ask, but I think there's a risk with that, because there is a risk that we dive straight in and we can, I think there's a lot of groundwork to do. And I don't know how I think it's this, Eden, maybe it's the skills around laying the ground and the foundations for those conversations rather than conversations themselves. Maybe we need to pay attention to.
Stay here, yes?
No, I was going to add to Tracy's point actually, which when Eden said something about language, it triggered a thought to me. So much of what we communicate is not through language, either what we say or what we write. Yet what we value within the society, talking about normative cultures again, is people who are open, people who can use language in a sophisticated way, people who can express themselves. Yes. Actually, we need to get better at understanding that kind of language hides a lot of stuff for us. Yeah. So I think that we need to delve deeper than just what has been said and what has been heard, and use that as a way of guiding and understanding what people feel. People talk about love. You know, how many times have people tried to express love? I mean, the feelings and emotions are not easily wrapped up in words. And if we're going to do something different, I think we need to think about different ways in which we value communication.
So we've spoken about the way that we inhibit ourselves, that we hold ourselves back, and that we allow all sorts of conventions and fears and anxieties to prevent us doing stuff. Well, if you could, what would you do? And I'd like you, actually, when you have this conversation, to really be prepared, to be brave and to be honest, and to allow yourself to dream. Because one of the things that gets shut down, we spend so much time fighting or worrying or being concerned about how bad things are or what we want to change. What would it be like if I could dream and if I could have an organization or a society which was truly inclusive? I remember when I was young, I had a very simple way of describing it, because all I was interested in was music, alcohol. Stop there. and I thought, boy, couldn't we have fun if we had a really inclusive society, if we had a really inclusive organization? Just think of the parties we could have if we just saw things differently. And then I went to a party like that and I couldn't take it because it was serious. I kept my clothes on. So, too much information. This question is simply, if I could, what I would really love to do is Okay, so that was the last small group conversation. Again, we're going to ask you if there's anything that anybody on any grouping would like to say, to offer us a thought to other people. We don't need formal reporting back. Any insights you've had, any strong emotions you've had, anything that you want to share with other people in the room. Indicate, stand up, or sit down and say what you have to say. I'll offer the microphone to anybody who wants it. Maybe, that smile on your face, it's so beautiful. There you go.
Flattery will get you nowhere. No, anyway. Actually, I personally found this a real struggle to answer. I really didn't know where to start. Yeah, I couldn't answer it. we're together in this. I just didn't know where to start, but there were some really interesting ideas coming out about a personal and, I think, organisational level, which was quite lovely to hear. I really liked your idea, was it John, about swapping places and getting to see what it's like in a different culture, different gender, and see what the experience would be like. So that kind of appealed to me, but I couldn't really answer the question. I don't know if anyone else wants to.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What stopped you
from
being able to answer the question?
It was too big. It was too big a question for me, and I felt I didn't know where to start. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Anybody else? Next person, please. John.
I came up with too many answers of what I'd love to do, but the one that really did strike me was the book Black Like Me from 1959. I can't remember the author, but if you haven't read it, please read it. It was fabulous, and it just struck me of wanting to bring it to today and get in the shoes of the author and get to know the other through being in their shoes. Because the thing that has struck me over the last decade or so, and then most recently with Brexit and Trump, is this kind of groundswell of anti-inclusion, anti-equality, anti-diversity is coming to the fore, and it's being able to, call people on it and get in the shoes and understand that. And I think the message from Black Like Me in '59 was, when we get free, we'll be able to do all these things and we'll be equal. Frankly, it ain't happened yet. So, what can we do to actually try and make that happen?
Oh, Jacqueline.
Oh, they're reliving something that's happened before. Ooh.
Right.
Doing it again, Mummy and Daddy.
I'm going to share with you an aha boohoo moment that I experienced with Valerie and Eden quite a few years ago. And it was in a coaching environment, and as an adult, you sort of like think you know everything and you've been there, you've done that. And I was in a coaching partnership situation, and Eden was observing. And we were talking, and Eden came up to me, and I know from experience growing up in church, your parents saying, go on, speak up, and you sort of think, like that. And that's exactly what Eden did to me. No, he didn't pinch me, he just... No, he didn't. I would have jumped out the chair. He actually nudged me and said, why'd you keep holding back? And I kind of went, like that, like a child. And that was quite profound. But we had a break, and I got talking to Valerie, and they hadn't spoken. And then Valerie just looked at me directly in the eyes, and she said, Jacqueline, why do you keep holding back? You've got such presence. And it was like, I've got to go to the loo. And I bawled. And that was a turning point for me. I haven't looked back. I haven't looked back since, because for me, what you see is what you get. I own who I am. And I've not actually gone back. Yeah. Yeah. So I actually started my own consultancy, and my dream is to continue with that, because my passion is people, and it's sharing what I've got inside of me with other people so they can get what I've got, and I've got a lot.
Yes, I'm sure.
It's risky. Sorry, that was a bit loud. I don't know what I've missed as I've popped out and come back in, but what I'm taking away from the conversation is a desire. There's some dreaming going on, which is quite exciting. But similar to you, Jacqueline, I went on to one of the Capital Transitions programs, and my frustration is, I've said this point before, over and over again. I've now left the NHS, so I mean, which is a shame, I know. Thank you, very flattering. But I think the point is, we've had some solutions in the past, and it's almost like things have gone backwards, and those things are not funded in because money is tight, which makes people anxious and wanting to survive. But my dream simply was to have the two of you do more of that, and how we could support you in doing more of that. And that's a simple dream. It's not something that's outrageous because it's happened before, but that was the kind of thinking I was having. Don't hug me. Don't hug me.
Somebody else say something, please.
I think Eden's overrated. I don't know what to say, actually. We were talking about what stops us saying what we would really love to do and what stops us thinking about what we would really love to do. I think the thing that stops me thinking about what I'd really love to do is what I think I should be doing, which is that whole sort of parental thing, isn't it, of what you've been brought up to believe you ought to be doing. So I think basically it's the whole kind of culture of how we're brought up and how we think we should be living rather than how we really want to live.
I think we were sort of chatting, and I thought I fed back an interesting sort of short film that I'd watched where it said that our lives were described as journeys, so we were always heading towards something, whether that's college, university, and then eventually it showed retirement. So it was always working towards something, and it sort of threw a different slant on things, where it described around music and bringing play and fun, and it described the piano, and it said that we play the piano, we don't work the piano. So I just found that really fascinating, and we were talking about, you know, how we might change education, and that we're always sort of like a one-size-fits-all approach to things, and it doesn't start us off in the right way to think diversely about things. So I found that quite fascinating.
It's interesting. Somebody in this room probably knows that the most watched video on YouTube, at least it was a year ago, was somebody talking about just that. It's about, it's about education.
I'm just reminded of the fact that every social change has begun with people sitting in rooms just like we're doing tonight and talking about what the possibilities might look like. And for me, what this is triggered is the fact, the simple statement that what we are talking about is possible and we can do it. We can start something that catches a fire. We can be different, and that will encourage other people to be different. We can speak differently, and that will encourage other people to also speak differently, to be courageous, to reach out, to step beyond where they've been before. And for me, there is something about us just recognizing that we can begin to do something different. We don't need permission, we can just do it. We don't need it framed for us, we can just launch in. We know how to have conversations, we know how to be kind, we know how to love, we know how to be, we know how to do all of those things, and they're the ingredients of the change that we want to make. So that's where it's left me tonight. So thank you, Eden.
Thank you. I'd actually like to do something that breaks the rules and is a bit risky. What I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about somebody in this room. And I suspect that many people who are in this room today would not have been in this room if it wasn't for Roger Klein. Right? Now, I'm challenged by this because I get peed off when I see all these people talking about how great Roger is, and you see a whole bunch of often black women surrounding Roger Klein saying, right, okay. And what makes this really difficult? What makes this really difficult for me is that you could not find a better, nobler human being than this man. And I don't want to follow that pattern of bigging up a white man, because it's just full of so much other stuff. But as a human being who has taken risks and started off having conversations, just like we're having here, because this is where some of the Snowy White Peak started, right? Roger went off and wrote that paper. Interestingly, not only did he write the paper, it's not the paper that made the difference. And I've not had this conversation with Roger, so this is just my observations. What made a big difference is the relationships that Roger had with a whole variety of different people and the way in which he influenced. And I think that the potential for change and taking responsibility for making change, Roger just got up and did it. And I think it's an example of how the sorts of things we're saying are possible are very, very possible. Your point, Tracy. It takes intelligence, it takes courage, but it also takes that kind of understanding of organizations as complex adaptive human systems and to use the relationships to enable a difference. We won't change our organizations or our society just by following the rules. We won't change it just by having a tick box approach to it. It takes that kind of the skills to navigate conflict and all sorts of things. And Roger does that beautifully. It's a shame for the stereotypes, but it's the facts. And I just want to say that because I don't want Roger to be here this evening and to think that the conversations that we're having is ignoring the work that he has done and what he's enabled to be possible. Because if it was not for the Workforce Race Equality Standard in the NHS, a lot of things would not have happened. I happen to believe, right? I happen to think that we need to do a lot more than the Workforce Race Equality Standard. But the achievement of having a standard that which people must hold themselves to account to, I think is phenomenal, and it's something that we have to respect and acknowledge Roger for. So thank you very much for that, Roger. Right. This is your life. But people, please avoid having photographs taken with him. I'd really appreciate it. And I could actually go around the room and talk about a lot of other people in this room who have done some really phenomenal and fantastic things. Because nearly everybody in this room that I know, the people I know, I don't know all of you, but I know most of you. And it's what? Gate crashes. Right. And I'm sure the people who are gate crashes are phenomenal as well. So that's what I was going to say. Right. So is there anybody else who'd like to say something before we move into the next phase? People over here, anyone?
Well, my point was, I'm just tired and I just want to be. No, it was about, if I really could, I'd love to get rid of all the bureaucracy that stops me doing what I really want to do. And I've got this dream that one day I'm going to be surrounded by people who will say, yes, Sue, come on, we can do, instead of, oh, you can't do that because, and shrine all that we can't do because of legislation. I want my colleagues to think, how can I support you to enable you to take those risks but still be safe? And for me, it's how do we get people to reframe those conversations to enable that to happen?
I would just like to speak a word coming from a place of real hope. Just this afternoon, I just been, bravo me, I just been elected a member of the Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. I went to the RSA. It's you just pay the money, Tracy. It's no big deal. And I was sort of outnumbered as a white man by the Backham BME people sitting around in there. My children's generation, it's all changing. It's changing. The relationships they have are completely different from the relationships when I was young. There's a lot of people. I mean, some of us are working in health and the government and social care and all that sort of thing. And we kind of perhaps see the worst. I don't know if we do or not. I don't know. I'd have to go back to Snowy White Peaks and the Peggy McIntosh thing. We could live in that, but there's a hell of a lot of allies out there from other sectors, from the arts, from music, from rap, from youth. And I think that it's not all down to us, because the young people are doing a lot of this stuff, and they are going to, I believe that the next wave is going to crash with the impetus of our younger generation. So I just want to speak to that hope.
Thank you. What I'd really like to say is the formal part of the evening is over. Okay, so we're not going to do any more facilitation, or there are no more envelopes to open. What we'd like to invite you to do and encourage you to do is to, I've been told that food is still perfectly, what's that word? Edible. And I'm pretty certain that the alcohol is still perfectly drinkable. And there's lovely soft drinks there. I'd like to encourage you to stay, hang around a bit, talk to people, perhaps have some one-to-one conversations, do whatever it is that you'd like to do. We do have to be out of there for 9 o'clock. Some of us are going to find a pizza place or something afterwards, but that's the end of the formal part of the evening. I'd like to thank you very much for coming. I hope you found the conversations useful. We got you on our list, and we're doing this again in a few months' time, and we'll invite you all back for more conversations. Okay? Thank you very much, everybody.
So I'm good. So I'm speaking in my ex-vicar capacity here. On behalf of those of us who are not from People Opportunities, I'm going to presume to say thank you very much, because it's great that you spoke about Roger, and I'm sure we all support every word of that. But we can't really leave tonight without saying thank you to People Opportunities and acknowledging and celebrating the quite fabulous work that Eden and all of the People Opportunities team, and for your imagination and generosity inviting us all here tonight. We thank you very, very much indeed.